All right. So, um, here's another topic. Why is identity such a big deal? Because when we're talking about DDD, we're talking about um, an identity crisis, more or less. So, but like, why is this necessarily a disorder? Because people freak out when they're lacking confidence in their um, identity, when they're not sure who they are. It really, really bothers us at a core level. Why is that? Okay. Well, basically, the reason why we seek an identity is because we want to feel like we're part of a greater whole. Um, this comes from our instinctual understanding that we reject on an intellectual level. We are taught to reject on an intellectual level because the human mind can only comprehend um, up to a certain scale or down to a certain scale. Once things get small enough or big enough, we just cannot wrap our heads around it. All right. So, in order to expedite the learning process, in order to help it along, we often break things down and compartmentalize them, and um, this is also a way of trying to separate out those who know a little bit about one thing or another from the ones that really know a lot about something, is by compartmentalizing and separating different things, and by saying, okay, this person is a paleontologist and they really, really know about fossils, and this person's a psychologist and they really, really know about the human mind, and this person is a surgeon and he really knows how to take the body apart and put it back together, or how to take a body that has fallen apart and put it back together, and it helps us be more accountable for what we do with what we know. But um, at a fundamental level, we recognize that all things work together, that all things are unified, um, and we need um, to acknowledge that in our own lives. Um, there are some things, like I said, so big or so small that we can't wrap our heads around them. That despite our inability to wrap our heads around them, we feel we are forced to deal with them and we need help. Um, we don't want to find conflict around every corner. We desire peace because without it, we don't even have the energy to wage war. We don't have the energy to fight for anything that we might desire, or anything that requires fighting to stay alive, to um, help others. I mean, without rest, without peace, without being able to relax, we know we wouldn't function. Um, that we can't function properly, that we would cease to be able to survive if we were actually left all alone. So, we all desire to be part of that greater whole, a part of the greater whole. We do not want to feel as though we have become lost in that greater whole, like we've simply dissolved into it. Because then at that point, it feels as though we're not really there. Um, or that we're there for all of it. And neither one of us helps us to function on an intellectual level. But we are intellectual beings. And that is the human mind is one of the main um, distinguishing factors between us and other organisms, and it defines a big part of who we are. Um, and in fact, the reason why, fun fact, the reason why human beings cannot walk as soon as they're born, but other mammals can, or swim, or whatever, um, is because our heads are so big, the space it takes to house our brains in the womb relative to the size of the human womb is too much. And it makes it so that there's not enough space for the rest of our bodies to develop before we're born. In essence, every single human being who has ever been born was a premature birth. Fun fact. Anyway, um, point is that is a big part of who we are as human beings. So, um, in order to maintain our fundamental, core, primal, whatever you want to call it, um, needs and our intellectual needs, we need to feel as though we were a part of that whole, not lost within that whole. Um, but then, you know, in order for us to feel as though we were a part of something without becoming lost in it, we need to find a certain type of definition. We need to find some boundaries between where we end and others begin. Um, this is a more conventional boundary setting. There's also a more unconventional boundary setting called diffuse boundaries, and I'll talk a little bit of that in a different video. And I can make a wonderful argument for either side. A lot of it depends on core values. A lot of it depends on a person's character. Um, but like I said, we want to feel like we're part of that greater whole. We need that sense of unity. It's what it's what we associate with meaning, another thing that we've come to associate as being absolutely necessary to the happiness and healthiness of an individual human being is meaning. It's why we often sacrifice our principles in order to be a part of the whole of society, even when trying to be a part of that whole sets itself directly against whatever principles that we may have. And when that happens, we tend to lose that identity a little bit and a little bit more. And sometimes we'll double down on trying to be the kind of person that we think we ought to be instead of who we really are. And it leads us away from who we really are. And we try to prove that new identity that we think will work better, that we have more faith in than we have faith in ourselves. We try to find a personality for that. And we try to find meaning for that. And that's where we start to get into things like DDD. But that's why it's so important to address this particular issue separately from others. That is why it is so important that you do not sacrifice your core personality for an assumed personality, because assumed personalities are never going to feel as real because of the way they rely on you walking away from who you are. Any validation you give that personality is going to be an intellectual construct. It's going to be a mental gymnastic. It's never going to feel as real. It's going to feel like you're losing yourself to the whole. Your identity is being eroded and you're just sort of dissolving into the whole while trying to maintain your uniqueness, your independence, what makes you you, and what separates you from the rest. And that's what you'll latch on to, what separates you from everyone else. But then that only separates you from becoming part of that greater whole. And now the whole reason for your search and identity has been undermined by your insistence on developing this artificial personality, this artificial identity. So that's it for this video, and I will see you guys in the next video.